now it's time to start our last project. I've got this still life piece here. We're just gonna do a little apple piece. So we're gonna shade it first with our burn, and then I've got some water soluble pencils, and we're going to add a little bit of color. And I've got a little bit of water here so we can kind of blend and mix these colors all together. First, before we get to it, I wanted to show you, so from our last project, there's a little bit of carbon buildup left on this tip. You can see it's gotten so hot that it's turned white. So I'm just going to give the tip a quick little rub here. Doesn't need to be anything too hard. You want to be pretty gentle with it because you don't want to tear your tip up. Just want to clean it off. And that's really all there is to it. You can see it's kind of shiny a little bit on the end. And that's it. Now it's ready to go for another project. So I'm going to set it to the side. And I've got my shader tip loaded here. It is on and it is ready to go. But before we get started, we've got to transfer this image to the wood. So I've got it here. I'm going to cut it. I'm using basswood for this project. It's so light and so soft, and it shades really, really well. Also, because it's so light and so bright, it really takes color well. So you can shade it a little bit with your burner, and then you can add some color. There are some types of wood that are kind of on the darker side, and it makes it a little bit harder to see some of those colors. So the first thing I want to do is cut this. I want it to fit the wood a little better. That wood is kind of small. And I just need to cut it enough so that it fits on this wood here. This is another pretty simple project. It's a shading project, but it's a real picture. We're going to try to replicate this little apple as closely as we can. And then we're going to add color. So it gives us the opportunity to try to shade something real and add some color. Okay, so now I've got it cut. I've got it where I want on the wood. So I'm just going to tape it down, hold it in place. I've got my sheet of carbon here, so I'm going to place that underneath. I've got my pencil, so I'm going to start outlining it. I'm going to be a little bit more gentle with this one because I don't want to have to erase so much. As long as I can kind of see the outline, that works. Plus, you know, it's an apple. You know what an apple looks like. If you don't have all the shades in there, all the outlines in there perfectly, you can kind of figure out where it goes. Okay. There's a little bit of a surface that it sits on here. So I'm going to do that just a little bit. Okay. And that's pretty good. It's not really dark. It's a pretty light tracing. But I don't want to have to erase all my carbon stuff off again. And you can see I've made some little finger marks there from my carbon. So I'm going to just get rid of those really quick. Alright. So I'm going to keep this handy because I want to be able to look and see. So the bottom area, you can see the bottom area and this side are pretty dark. And this side over here, this is where the sun, this is where the light's coming in and it's shining down on this side. So we want to keep that side light. So I'm going to start with the darker area. I always like to start dark and then work my way up to the lighter shades. So I'm going to start down here. And it's pretty dark. So I'm going to go full force on the heat. And you can see this basswood is like butter. Just burns super, super soft. And I'm going to do this sort of upward motion here to kind of mimic the sort of stripes and shapes and textures in the apple. So I'm just sort of pushing this forward or upward. Remember, we're just using this picture as a guide. It doesn't have to match it exactly. Not every shade has to be in exactly the same spot. You just kind of want to use the picture as a baseline to know where your light spots are and your dark spots are. And then you can kind of change it up a little bit. So there's room for error here. It doesn't have to match it perfectly. But you can see I'm kind of mixing in some darker stripes with some lighter ones. I want there to be some light spots and some dark spots. And I'm going to come back later and add, we're going to do that circular motion again to kind of even some of these spots out, because you can see it's kind of, there's some spots here where it's kind of jaggedy, but I just want to get a baseline shade going. So now I'm starting to add more of these darker areas higher up on the apple to kind of give this side the darker side. You know, another thing you could do too is not shade it so much and use your pencils to give it more shade. But I like to use the burn for the shade and use my color as sort of an accent to it. I like the burn to be the star of the piece and the color to kind of be just an add-on, an accent to the overall look. Okay, you can see the darkness kind of, you know, consumes this whole side. So I'm going to really add a lot of shade to this side. When it's done, you really want to be able to see where that light source is hitting the apple. So you got to give it some good contrast. Now I'm going to start pulling from the top, and I'm just adding some more of these, a few more of these lines here. I just want to be able to see the curvature of the apple with these lines. And this just kind of helps sets the tone for those curves. A couple of darker lines that come up here. Okay, now I've got a pretty good idea of where my darkest spots are. So now I'm going to use the circular motion, and I'm going to go back over this and just kind of even these spots out. So I'm going to blend some of these pieces together so that you can see the lighter spots and the darker spots. All of this right here, I'm going to leave alone for now. I'm going to kind of fill in all of this stuff here at the bottom, and then we'll come back to these lighter spots at the end. I'm going to turn the fan on. Keep the burner a little bit cooler so we don't burn too dark. So here we go. So what I'm looking for is just a very light sort of blending of these stripes. I don't want there to be any sort of definite lines. Okay, and now I'm going to turn my fan on. This wood is so soft, it's just burning so quickly, and it's a little bit darker than I want. So I'm going to switch this on, and that's going to keep my burner cooler so it doesn't over scorch the wood. Move these over a bit. There we go. Okay. So I'm just trying to blend these pieces, these lines and these marks that I made. I don't want you to see definite lines in the apple. I just want you to get sort of an impression of the lines. So I'm just using that circular motion, the same from before, and I'm just moving it quickly across the wood. I'm just trying to tie in together all of these different shades. This is a pretty hard line here, so I'm just going to kind of hover over the edge of that line with the flat edge of the burner until it kind of softens. And once it starts to soften, I'm going to move outward. And you can see now there's no more definite line there. It's softened a little bit. Same thing over here. So there's a definite line there from where I was creating those sort of stripes. And I'm just going to use the circular motion to soften that edge until you can't see it anymore. You just kind of want to see a hint of it. And add another little bit of a shadow here, just to kind of add to that impression of a stripe. And I want to leave myself enough of a lightened area so that you can see the color well. Here we've got another definite line, so I'm just going to soften it using the tip of the wood here. The tip of the burner. kind of soften that edge. You want it to lose that hard, definite edge. You want it to soften. Okay, now this side of the apple starts to get a little bit darker. Just soften these little bits up here a little bit. That edge looks a little too hard. Here we go. You just want to blend it a little. I'm just trying to blend those lines out. Okay. Do the same thing. I'm just going to start softening these lines. So I'm really paying attention now to how much darker this side is than this side. I want there to be a noticeable difference. Just going to turn that fan off for a second while I can kind of get to some of these darker spots. Still just blending all of these lines together. Okay. So now I'm going to do this top bit, and it's really, really light. There's a section here where there's hardly any color at all, and then of course the sort of dip down into the core. There's another section of let me just tighten this really quick. Okay. So now I'm going to start working on this little core spot. Once it dips down into that section, there's a whole nother sort of section of little lines that kind of go off in the other direction, so you can tell it's rounded on the other side. So we want to make sure that we kind of capture those rounded spots. So I'm just using the tip here. I flipped it upside down because I want these lines to be smaller. They don't need to be as wide as the other side. And I'm very slowly, lightly making marks here. I don't want these to be too dark. It's better that they start out light and you kind of have to go over them a bunch than it is to start too dark, because you can't undo that. So I'm just kind of pulling, sort of pulling motion where I'm just pulling lines down. And give it the appearance of being rounded from that other side. Just soften that edge a little bit. Start going in the other direction here. This kind of goes to about right here. I'm just going to add a few little ones here. Don't want this to be too dark, but I want you to see those little directional lines that let you know where the curve is. I'm just going to fill the stem in. Looks a little darker on the top. I'm going to add a deeper shade in here. So I'm just continuing to fill in these shades and softening these apple stripes until they're really blended and have a nice overall finished look until the burning is completely finished. So I'm just going to keep adding some surface here. I want the spot directly under the apple to be a little bit darker so that it looks like a shadow. So I'm going to add more of a deep burn here. And then as I move outward, I'm going to go a little faster to lighten it up. So keep in mind as you're working on these pieces that they don't need to be, they don't need to be masterpieces or anything. This is just a way for you to practice. This is a good subject for you to work on for your first sort of realistic shading project. You need something to focus on and use to create depth and all of that with shade. So don't focus too much on perfection. Just focus on the technique and trying to learn how to use the heat to create shadows. Okay, I'm going to go a little bit lighter. I'm not going to go up very much more. Okay. And we've got our apple on the surface there. So I'm going to set my burner down. I'm going to go ahead and turn it off because I don't need it. And it's going to be cooling off. Then I'm going to get my pencils ready, my water ready, and then we're going to start adding color. Okay, you guys, so we finished burning our last piece. Now it's time to add color. I've got these water-soluble pencils here, so I can just kind of use these to color on the wood. And then I've got a little bit of water and some brushes. I'm going to use that to kind of blend them together. So I'm going to start with a little bit of yellow and green, and I'm going to go kind of light on it. I don't want to like over saturate the whole piece with color. I kind of just want to add a little hint of color for accent. So in this sort of lighter spot, you can see here where it's lighter in this area, I'm going to maybe just assume there's a little bit of a yellowy green thing going on. And I'm just going to kind of color in a little bit of that. I also like to use this right here up around the core, because right here where it's kind of going on the other side, I can use a red there and you will be able to see the difference in the sides. One's more yellowy greenish and one will be more pinkish. I'm not going to get real crazy with this. Just a little bit. A little bit of this green. So you can kind of see it when it starts to come to life like that. I love that when I'm working on a piece and as I'm working on it, I can kind of see the realism come out as I'm working. Okay. And a little bit of green. So on the other side, I like this more of a pinky red than like a super bright red. I'm going to add just a little bit on that other side. Not too much. I'm going to hit it with a little bit of yellow, kind of blend it. And that water soluble addition at the end will help me kind of blend these together too. So now I'm gonna, this poor little pencil, the little thing's coming out. That's okay, we can work with that. So I'm just gonna kind of lightly add in some of this pinky color. I didn't want it to be too bright red. Add a little bit here and this yellow part and blend those together. Just making some pretty light marks. I don't want anything too drastic. I'm just going to cover a pretty good amount of space with this pinky color. And I'm going to come back with a little bit of a deeper red and add that to it. I don't want a pink apple. But I don't want it to be too, Crayola red either. So, and a couple of different colors in here. This red's a little bit deeper. Just add some marks here like this. Okay, I'm going to add this super deep red for these sort of bottom areas here. So you'll see a little bit of color on the bottom, but not too much. Really want to be able to still see all that dark burn. We don't want to cover it up with color. I come back and add a little bit more of this yellow here. I think I want it to come down just a little bit further. I'm going to start a little bit of water. I'm going to start blending these colors together. And, you can layer these too. So, listen, there's a little mark there. Get rid of that guy. If you start blending these colors together and you decide you want to add a little bit more of this or that, you can always layer these on top of each other. you can see, because it's water soluble, they're starting to kind of blend together. And I'm just going to keep following the same motion that I've been using from the beginning, which is this sort of up and down vertical motion to kind of keep the direction the same. Now you can see those harsh pencil marks starting to kind of disappear. It's really just becoming more color. And you know, of course, there's lots of ways to add color to your wood burning. You don't have to just use these colored pencils. You can use gel paints and gel stains. And I like to use India ink sometimes. You can use acrylics and watercolors. There's lots of ways to add color to your wood. I've even used craft paper before. Just cut out some cool craft paper and put it in a section. Okay, so I'm just doing the same thing still. Just kind of going over the apple where I've added color and blending these kind of colors together. Trying to fade out some of these harsh pencil marks, but still kind of keep that apple stripe look going on. This area here where we did a super deep burn doesn't absorb as well was this area that didn't burn as much, but that's okay, it'll dry. Okay, you guys, that's it. That's all there is to it. Finished adding color to the piece. So it's all done. We've got a little color.